You're listening to the AI Moment with me, Jonathan Wagstaff.
And me, Danny Denhard.
And Dan, what are we going to talk about today?
Today, we're going to dive into, is AI just for enterprise now? So what we really mean is a lot of AI companies are realizing that humans, so the everyday user, that doesn't actually want to pay $20 or £20 a month on an AI tool. And what that means is, for example, OpenAI, who run ChatGPT, are now concentrating on the business offerings. So they called a code red in December. They haven't called another one, but essentially they're operating in that now. And what we're seeing a lot of the time is these tools are going more and more into the enterprise. They're building more and more tools for enterprise as opposed for general use. So Jonathan, what's your thought and how have you landed with this pondering that I came up with on a Monday morning?
Yeah, well, I think we've had 3.5 years of these tools being available. And I think there was obviously a need to get people playing with them. So we're essentially consumer tools for the first couple of years, encouraging people, and very cheap, £20 a month, $20 a month, whatever you're paying in your local currency. But I've thought for a while now that if you look at the financials of a company like OpenAI, they don't make sense going forward. If you look at the money they're going to have to spend on build out of data centers and all the other things they're going to do, they're not going to get there by charging lots of people 20 quid a month. That's not going to work. So there's got to be some change there. And I think that they, as you say, have seen that the strong business class solutions are going to be things they can charge lots of money for. And a lot of their current activity points to them doing more and more in that space. So something's got to change, and we'll talk in the next few minutes about what might change there, but something's got to change. And it would appear that business is where, even though the buzz started with consumers, business is where the money's going to be for companies like OpenAI. The model may be different from some of the others. Google have already got a different commercial model. We can talk about that as well, but that's my instinct as to what's going on there.
When I was making some note, I was thinking about where the value is really coming from. And a lot of the reports say what people are doing with it. But when you don't necessarily when all models are essentially the same, as in from free to £200 or dollars a month, you're getting a decent output. You're getting really good results. And most people won't hit their limit or their limit to their usage really quickly. So they probably won't get there ever in a day. So actually, where do you want to point resource into that? Or would you, as a business, point resource into where you're going to spend loads of tokens and you're going to spend loads of money? And I know almost everyone of people I talk to regularly, they don't have a model of choice. They flirt between multiple different ones. So they have,
For sure.
They'll use Claude, they'll use Gemini, use ChatGPT, and it doesn't really matter the model they use. It's just the output that they get. I think that if you're Anthropic was smart, we said that way back when. And I think OpenAI have slowly sort of adapted to that. But as businesses, you're the one that's spending a lot of the money, and that's where you should be getting most of the output. So I think a lot of these models and a lot of these companies are now realizing actually, if we were to go really hard in consumer, it would have to be a killer app, or it'd have to be something, a utility that you use all the time, and it's just not there for consumer use.
Well, I think that's partly what's driven. I mean, we've seen, things like Yahoo Scout coming out. We've seen things like Claude Codework. I suspect that on an individual basis, that might be that movement of the AI to be more adjacent to or within the tools we already use might be the way the consumer bit goes on in the end. I think that if you look at those, so AI then is inside each email, and it's inside your calendar, and it's inside your banking software, your shopping tools. I think that might be where a lot of consumers end up with it, because like any technology, Dan, there are people like you and I know who are all over the LLMs right now, and they were what you call power users. But most people are using it for bits and pieces. But if it could be fed to them in a way that it just enhanced what they're already doing, the tools they're already using, that would be good. That would be enough for them. They'll get the advantage of the AI without having to subscribe to the LLM separately and do all that stuff. And I wonder if that's where they're headed with some of these new announcements in the last couple of months of things like the co-work tools and a really tight integration with some of the stuff you've got going on. Whether that be things you do at work like Excel, or whether it's like home tools as well. That might be where that's going, I think.
That's why I think Google was so smart with Gemini.
Yeah.
They rolled it out into the spaces and places that you're going to use most. And they really thought about what their use case was for these different tools, and then said, how could AI enhance it? So Copilot, although you and I, it's not something we love, and although we did an episode of how good it was, there's so many different ways to use it. They've put it in the places where people will use it most. I don't know many people that would go home and then decide to continue using it. Whereas I can see Gemini and some of those sort of tools, you would go in and you continue to use it because you're using it frequently and it's in the places that you're going to want to use. And that's what a point I tried to make about Apple months ago was Apple don't need to spend billions and trillions in AI while everyone else is spending it. They can wait out until it's baked into their ecosystem. So they still control OS, they still control browsers, they still control app stores and iOS. So that's where Apple are being so smart. And a point I made, I want to sort of reiterate is, for Apple and big companies like that, time is their competitor, not necessarily another tech company or platform. So it's really interesting to see, and maybe a business lesson for people to take on is when everyone else is rushing towards something, sometimes space and time is the best lesson, best teacher, and not wasting all of that money into it. So I do think Google was smart at doing and rolling out the way that they have. Apple were very smart at taking a step back, and Anthropic could be smarter, get smarter again, and then roll it out and have micro tools and tasks baked into their app or into their site that does this inside of it. And we rarely speak of Grok, but I want to give an example to people to make them feel like they could use a tool that they might use a lot with X, or they might have overlooked. Is Grok, you can do a number of different automations, a task with it. I've now done it to send me trending tasks once a day. So trending topics or stories that I'm interested in. And I've also got it to send me a newsletter every day. And that just breaks down all the things I'm interested in and I might have missed. That's free, easy and simple. And it's baked on top of the use case that I don't have to be on X and get FOMO all the time. So I do think there's going to be a lot of these use cases and automations that are built and tasks that are built. So everyday user doesn't have to get a premium account. It doesn't have to spend $20 or £20 a month to take on.
Yeah, no, you've long been an advocate of Apple's approach, what we think is Apple's approach, and why that might be the smart move. You said about them a long time ago, talking about something else. It's like what they're very good at is they zag when everyone else zigs, and I think this could be another case of that. The other thing to say, of course, is the flip side of the consumer stuff is actually why is enterprise? If consumer is not as attractive as it might be, then why is enterprise attractive? Well, businesses are very, very good at use cases and business justifications, aren't they? And so we're already seeing in enterprise class LLMs, coders are using it to write code faster. Sales reps are using it to prep for sales calls better. And those things are very measurable. So the business case is straightforward to develop for a lot of businesses, whether it's sales, whether it's coders, whether it's internal knowledge, customer services. So those things are easier to value than a kind of, well, this is a fun tool to chat with, which is where a lot of us have been on a consumer side. So that doesn't make AI only for business, but it does suggest why, OpenAI, for instance, are really shifting their focus towards coding and enterprise with the tool. And it's like, that's probably why, because those things are easy to justify. And then you can get into hundreds of dollars per person per month subscriptions for enterprise class products, which are going to get them closer to where they need to be commercially. So there's a kind of, as we say, we think the changing nature of the consumer product, but also the business justification of the enterprise product are both levers that are probably moving things in that direction. I think, I don't know. What do you think?
I agree. And I think sometimes you can land and expand in the enterprise space and expand into the consumer use case. So I do think there are a number of different ways where these AI companies will go back into enterprise, build out these tools, and then expand out into everyday usage. So I think it's smart. And I also think that there are ways where you can reinvest some of that money and use the tools that you use at work potentially to use outside of work too. So they've got you both ends, and if they're a valuable software or tool inside of work, they'll often be a valuable tool outside of work too. So that's something to consider. To give people a takeaway, or a couple of takeaways, what would you recommend on this side? How would you frame it for people?
I would say, I don't think LLMs are going away in their current form, but I think they'll be more of a power user product. So I think there's a big chunk of the population who is quite enjoying it, but doesn't really want to get into it in a big way. And so as mass market consumer AI gets baked into the tools people already use, I think you're right about Apple. That's where I think a lot of people will encounter AI going forward, and they might not even know they're encountering it. In the same way that, we've been using AI in things like Spotify and in our social media feeds. It's been part of that for a long time. We don't really know that's happening. I think we'll go back to more of that. I think there will be consumer LLM, but it'll be the power users that we go with there. And meantime, I think in the enterprise, they will be paying for dedicated platforms. All those extra things, the security and the admin and the workflow integrations that's all important. And I think that's clearly where OpenAI, as you look at their business enterprise product messaging, that's clearly where they're headed. So for a lot of us, it'll be baked into what we do anyway. For those of us that want to be power users, there'll still be that product available. Might cost a little bit more than it currently does. And then for enterprises, I think that's where the big prize is for the big AI companies. That would be my short summary. Dan, what do you think?
Completely nailed it. I completely agree. I often think that, as you said, we're 2 years in, 3 years in, a lot of tools take a long time to mature and find their real true use case. So I think AI is slowly becoming a tool that will be integrated in a lot of different tools. So if you're worried that you haven't hit the ground running internally, or you don't have your own tool, or you're wondering where to invest, it's still quite early on. And while people are working through this, you've got the advantage where you can use many different tools for free and build out your different use cases and your confidence to then roll it out into work.
Yeah, it was a workshop I gave on Thursday of last week, and somebody asked me, where are we? And I used your crawl, walk, run analogy. I said, we're right at the start still. We really are. We're still in the crawl phase. There's lots and lots to get on with here. So anybody who's not really got started, get started. There's plenty of time to learn and work with this stuff. It is good to see you, my friend, and I will see you next time.
Thanks for listening today, everyone. If you liked what you heard, please give us a rating and review in any of the podcast players. We have a supporting newsletter, which is aimoment.co.uk, that comes out on Mondays and Fridays with every pod, and we dive a little bit deeper. So please subscribe there. Have a great week, and we'll see you soon.